Now we get to spend a little bit of time talking about rural driving or country driving, right? We've talked about urban driving. When we started talking about that, we hit a little bit what it was like to drive in the country. You know, we talked about the fact that country driving, rural driving was a little bit slower pace. There are fewer potential hazards along the way. But there's some things that make rural driving just as dangerous. Okay. And so when we talk about the characteristics of rural driving, there's a couple of things that we've got to recognize. First of all, rural roads might be a little bit narrower than an urban road, and not just like the whole road. Okay. But the lanes themselves sometimes can be a little bit narrower. They might be paved. They might not be paved. They might be gravel. They might be just a dirt surface. As we look at the outsides of the roads, right? The shoulders can be different. They might be very narrow or uneven. The pavement itself might be uneven or might be cracked up. I always take my kids and drive around some old roads so they can recognize and realize how the edges of the road themselves can deteriorate over time. And quite frankly, sometimes the rural roads aren't as high a priority for the state, for the people that repair the roads, as these urban roads are, because there's such a lower volume of traffic. Another issue that we have is nighttime, right? In cities, a lot of times we've got businesses, we've got street lights, but we don't in rural driving, we don't have those street lights a lot of times. And so it gets darker. It's a little bit harder to see. We're relying on our headlights. Okay. And so what we've got to do is make sure that we're always paying attention. Speed, right? We talked about in urban settings, how speed limits tended to be lower. Sometimes, I think in Wilmington, the citywide speed limit is 35 miles an hour. Okay. Unless it's otherwise posted. In rural areas, a lot of times, the speed limit on rural roads is going to be 55. Okay. And the state sets those based on the best kind of the traffic conditions, the road conditions, what they think the road can handle. So sometimes it's 45, sometimes it's 55. You might even run into some in Brunswick County, for instance, Highway 74 in Brunswick County gets up to 60 in some points. Okay. And then as you get further out towards Charlotte, it's designated as a future interstate, and it gets up to 70, even though it's not actually an interstate. And so there's some things that we have to think about as we start driving faster, right? And that is what we can see. Okay, our line of sight, how far we can see, how long it takes our car to stop. I know you and Mr. English talked about stopping distance. The faster our car goes, the longer it takes us to stop, right? The ability to control the vehicle, the faster you go, kind of little movements are going to be magnified. Okay. And so, if you take a sudden movement, a sudden turn and at going 55 miles an hour, that could have potentially disastrous effects on your vehicle. And so with speed, we also have a higher chance of injury. Okay, the faster we go, the more likely we are to get injured. The posted speed limit is the maximum that you are supposed to travel. Okay, it is the speed that is safe in perfect driving conditions, and that's what's kind of hard for us sometimes to understand. I know you've probably been in a car with your parents, and your parents probably are like, "Oh, speed limit's 45, and they're driving 50." Okay. And like, oh, it's only 5 miles. If it says 45, that means we can go 50. And that's not what the law says. The law says that the speed limit that is posted is the maximum, the highest that you can travel, right? In perfect conditions. And so if there's other factors, if there's inclement weather, if there's hills, if it's a curvy road, if there's a lot of intersections, if there's bad road conditions, you're not supposed to go over that speed. You, in fact, should decrease your speed to adjust for these bad conditions. All right. And so you are responsible for that. You're responsible for determining what is safe and what is not. One thing that we see in rural driving are some different kind of traffic controls, right? You're going to see signs warning you of intersections coming up. You're going to see signs warning you of curves coming up or hills coming up. Okay. You might see deer warning signs for deer crossings or warning signs for tractor crossings. You might see all of these different signs that you probably aren't going to see in an urban area. Okay. And they're there to tell you what potential hazards are coming up. All right, so you need to know your signs. You need to be able to identify them, so that can help you as you're doing your IPDE process to, oh, there's an intersection coming up. When you drive with me, if I were to do your driving portion, when we're driving down some of our rural roads, what I'll tell people is, okay, at the next intersection, all right, and what I want them to get used to is that they're looking for the warning sign that has a crossroad on it. All right, there's an intersection coming up. That sign is telling you. I'm not going to say, oh, it's right, no, up there. No, I tell them, look at the next intersection. So when they see the sign, they know what's coming up, right? And so know your signs. That's going to help you identify hazards, right? As you look on a rural road, you're not just looking at the road. You're not just looking at the traffic in front of you and the traffic coming at you. You also need to be identifying, and you need to be scanning the area around the road, looking at the shoulder of the road. Okay, how close is the ditch? I know a few years ago in Pender County, there's actually a school bus that tipped over on, I think it was on Highway 210 between Hampstead and Rocky Point, where it hit the shoulder and ended up laying over in the ditch because the ditch is very close to the road at that point in time. The shoulder was a little wet. The bus kind of hit the shoulder and just slid right on over into it. And so pay attention to the shoulders of the road. Pay attention to driveways and businesses and fields that you might have tractors coming across, so that you're able to, again, pinpoint these potential points of conflict. Also, make sure that you're recognizing what conflict or what restrictions exist. Okay, is there a curve? Is there a hill? Are there things that might prevent you from seeing what's going on? As you approach intersections, for instance, I know when I do a lot of my driving and I'm heading out kind of on the western part of the county, there's some intersections that you come up to. If you come up at certain parts of time in the summer, like you can't see what traffic is coming because the road, the corn is so high. All right. So make sure that you're aware of the hazards. Make sure that you're paying attention to the things around you.